Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us over your lunch hour today for another one of our West webinars. My name is Lola Adewogan, and I am West Marketing and Admin Assistant. We have Anna Castle, Program Manager at Cultivator, which is powered by Connexus. If you have any questions for Hannah as we go through the presentation, please submit them in the Q&A box, not the regular chat box. However, do feel free to use the regular chat box to introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about your business. And as always, this webinar is being recorded and will be available for on-demand viewing. With that, I'll pass it over to you, Hannah, to now begin the presentation.
Awesome. Thanks so much for having me, everybody. I'm super excited to be here. Christy from Hyan, I see you in the chat there. That's super awesome. So I'm going to share my screen and then I'll actually jump into it, but I always like to do a quick check that I can toggle back and forth and I can still see the chat box. So just give me 2 seconds here to get organized. Perfect. If somebody could just hit me a chat, thumbs up, if everybody can see my screen.
You can see the screen?
Yeah, okay, Carmen said yes. So I have so many fans in the audience. I'm just kidding. Awesome. So thank you so much for having me. It is really awesome to be here. Truth be told, I was a little bit nervous when I got asked this presentation. I was like, I'm gonna have to amalgamate so much information. So what I really hope is that there's something for everybody here today. Of course, there's gonna be lots of room for questions. So what you can expect is me to chat a little bit about growing and scaling and what I've learned over my career. 20 to 30 minutes of me chatting at you. I wanted to leave lots of room for questions at the end. So feel free to throw them in the chat or throw them in the Q&A. So I always like to warm up the crowd. So first and foremost, if you want to throw in the chat, drop in the chat to me like memory lane. When you were a kid, what did you want to be when you grew up? Assuming the majority of you are entrepreneurs or you're in entrepreneur space or you know a little bit about entrepreneurs and what we do. So throw in the chat for me, what did you want to be when you grow up? And then also just make sure you're using everyone as an option so everybody can see your chat as well. So while you drop that in there, Carmen doesn't know how to spell veterinarian. That kills me. You might be like, okay, wait, who are you? So who am I? So like we said, my title is program manager here at Cultivator, meaning I oversee all of the programs, so the intake, the recruiting of all of our startups. And I'll tell you more about that. I'm also a proud member of the Council for Entrepreneurial Growth, which means I've just recently joined the Audacity movement here in Regina, making sure we have a better place for entrepreneurs to thrive. I'm a huge fan of founders. I have a major history of working mostly for female-led businesses, which is something I'm really passionate about here at Cultivator. And then I always tell my people my background is actually in theater. So how I got here, not entirely sure, but I did go to theater school. And then the majority of my professional background is in retail operations, technology, and business. So that's a little bit about me. You might be wondering, but what is Cultivator? So if you've never heard of Cultivator before, that's not surprising. It's totally okay. I do think it's sometimes we're maybe a Saskatchewan best kept secret, but we're Canada's first credit-led incubator, and we're proudly powered by Connexus. So Connexus Credit Union, obviously being a major champion of communities and being really passionate about the economic well-being of people here in the province. So what the heck is an incubator? These are the questions I had. These are the questions I have. I get asked all the time. So in one sentence, an incubator, we grow SK startups. Okay, fine. I know that totally doesn't mean anything to the majority of you. And truth be told, a few years ago, I had the same thoughts. So what I can define it as is we support technology-based startups from ideation to scale. So a little bit different, than traditional business models. And I'll share more about those definitions as well. But we have programming, space, and mentorship for companies that are building technology-based businesses here in Saskatchewan. And Regina was actually the last major city in Canada to have an incubator. And you might be wondering, why Saskatchewan? Do we have a tech scene? Do I know any technology entrepreneurs? And there are actually some pretty crazy heavy hitters here from the province. So you can see some success stories here. So, 7 Shifts out of Saskatoon, Skip the Dishes out of Saskatoon, IQ Metrics, right here in Regina, Integrain, they're really leading the charge in technology. And that's where we really kind of uncovered that there was definitely a market, for this in Saskatchewan. So what you probably don't know, and maybe you do know, is these are cultivator companies. So these are companies that we work with full time. We're working with them to grow their business right here at home. And some of these might be familiar to you. So if you know any of them or you want to give any of them a shout out, I'd love to see that in the chat as well. I feel like lots of people don't know that our companies, have their homegrown offices here, but they serve customers all over the world. So some really amazing examples. Cerise here, I know she's on the the webinar, but they have a huge contract with Corrections Canada, and they're helping keep all of corrections officers and parole officers safe, and they're doing it right here at home in Saskatchewan. So you can learn lots more about Cultivator later, but that's not really what we're here to talk about. The one kind of thing I wanted to share about our companies really quickly is it's working. So Saskatchewan is an amazing place to start, grow, and scale a business. These are just some snapshots from the last year of amazing things that have happened, here at home. Brew Ninja, raising the significant capital raise, Vendasta, huge capital raise, Precision AI. There's lots and lots of things happening. So the entrepreneurship community here is definitely growing. And one thing I always share, especially because, working with Wes and primarily a lot of female entrepreneurs is, Cultivator has supported 66 companies, but the biggest feather in our cap is 24 of them have been female-led startups. So thank you to all of you that participate in our programs, but also it is a great place to be a female founder. So before we jump into, what I've learned growing and scaling your business, I want to make a few definitions, because ultimately today I'm going to wear my startup hat, meaning there has been a ton of methodology and things built for startups that I think is super, super crucial for people to understand, even when growing, SMBs or traditional businesses. So there's a few definitions I kind of wanted to go through, which is a startup, a grow up, and a scale up. No, we don't normally call them grow ups, but I do think that it does fit the purpose. So a startup meaning it's a company that's in the early stages. In Cultivator specifically, we're looking for companies that are solving really unique problems. They're agile, they're scrappy, they're kind of just like doing whatever needs to get done to make their business kind of get off the ground. We have the grow stage, so we can think of this linearly. So companies that are like adding team and resources and capital, all of this in the pursuit of, generating revenue. And then we really have the scale up phase, which is a totally different kind of headspace, which is scaling and your revenue increases, but you don't increase your output. So what we look at is companies that are now like doubling, 10xing, growing their revenue significantly, but they're set up to be in a position where they can actually start to grow at a very rapid rate. We also define this a few different ways, and you can, we'll get access to the slides later, but also I've linked some resources in here. But ultimately, in the start phase, so early stage, we're looking for what's called the problem solution fit. So you found a problem, maybe you're scratching your own itch, and you're looking to build a solution. When you get into the grow phase, we're looking for what's called product market fit. So you have this product, and now you're really trying to deploy it to the market that you can capture the fastest. And then in the scale phase, you're looking for market monopolization. So there's lots of different things that happen through all of this, but I think it's really important to just really think back and start at the beginning. So the beginning meaning, if we tried to think of a good idea, we wouldn't have been able to think of a good idea at all. You just have to have a solution for a problem in your own life. And this is Brian Chesky, co-founder of Airbnb. And if you don't know the story of Airbnb, it goes along with, they didn't have enough money to pay their rent. They knew there was going to be a conference in their city. So they started renting out an air mattress in their apartment so that they could make a little bit of extra cash. And that's really where Airbnb started. So if you think of the problem, I don't have any money to pay my rent. And the solution is, well, I could just rent my living room out in an Airbnb. So that's what we look for here at Cultivator, is problems we're solving. So a really good tool, if you're in this kind of phase of your business, is a lean canvas. So using the lean stack methodology to really understand and fall in love with the problem that you're trying to solve. So this is a great tool. I really wanted to start with that really easy early stage startup methodology, just so when we jump into the scale piece, you can kind of understand our lens. So the main methodology we focus on here, problems. So fall in love with the problem and understand that problem might change. Customers, so continually talking to customers in a structured and designed way. And then running experiments. So learning as much as you can, as fast as you can, and then making the appropriate adjustments. So from the startup lens, this is really, really what we focus on when companies are growing at a rapid rate. And I'm just going to touch on the customer piece really quickly, and then we're going to jump in, to some scale specific pieces. But one thing I always share with founders or people I'm working with is that your customers are the baseline of your business. So they're helping you make all of your decisions, and understanding your customer in a really, really deep way is a really amazing way to support your growth and your decision making. And so the key thing here to notice is that talking to customers is cyclical. So you talk to your customers at the beginning, you build them a product. Well, you still have to talk to them because you're going to iterate that product. So this is a big piece of methodology that we really work on here at Cultivator. And I think a really critical piece of this is once you define and understand who your customer is, you can build for their specific needs. And one thing of note that I think is super crazy that I feel like maybe none of us are prepared for is in the next 5 years, Gen Z and Alpha, those generations are really coming up and they have more spending power than ever, and they have more access to information than ever. And we will be competing for their dollars in a completely different landscape than we have in the last 10 years of retail and consumerism. So ultimately, like, they have the most spending dollars of any generation. They estimate it to be about $9 trillion in spending power. So for companies, capturing even just a small portion of that market is super critical, especially when you're trying to grow at a very rapid rate. So I wanted to give you a quick background of Cultivator, a quick background of our methodology, and then we're going to jump into the scale pieces. But like I said, I would love to see any questions come through. I can totally answer them midway. I'm just going to open the Q&A box really quick just to make sure I haven't missed anything so far. But here's what we're going to jump into now. So what does scale really mean to you? I know I defined it kind of earlier as growing your business at a rapid rate with a little bit of less effort. We see with technology companies, people can 10x their revenue in under a year, which seems really crazy, but those businesses are poised to scale. But I wanted to clarify that scale can mean different things for different people and different businesses. So scaling can mean really improving your operations. It can mean physical expansion. So I spent quite a few years doing physical store expansion at Helberg and Burke, and that was really scaling, was opening more stores, getting product into customers' hands. It can be scaling your marketing efforts. So digital ads, reaching a new kind of base of customer. It can mean new products. It can mean differentiation. But ultimately, it means finding the unique path of growth that your company wants to follow. And there's some really amazing examples, especially from here in Saskatchewan. And technology is, a little bit different in the sense that maybe your customer base isn't here, but you can serve them from here. So, we have a company that the majority of their customers are in New York City. They operate out of Saskatchewan, but they actually found their product market fit in an entirely different country. And that is what they learned through customer discovery and going after the biggest market that can help them scale. So they say, and this is the team from iComply, they say, well, if we take New York, then we'll just have to take LA and it'll be super easy. So I think scale can mean different things to different people, but understanding who your customer is and getting to where they are is really probably the key to making sure that your business is sustainable. So first things first is defining, what scale really means to you, and then determining, how you want to scale. But on that note, I really love this quote. My friend Dave recently recommended this book to me. It's called It Doesn't Have to Be Crazy at Work. And this excerpt, kind of kills me, which is things get harder as you go, not easier. And the easiest day is day one. And so that's the dirty little secret of business. And I think this is quite funny because he's essentially alluding to the fact that just starting is actually easier than staying. And so what he really says, and I'll read this to you verbatim, is startups are easy, but stay-ups are hard. So keeping the show running for the long term is a lot harder than walking on stage for the first time. On day one, every startup in the world is a business, but on day 1,000, only a fraction of them remain standing. And that's the reality. So what he says in this book is pace yourself, don't burn out early, and don't think that the hard part is behind you. So, kind of a harsh reality. I'm really glad Cerise agrees. I know that you see this firsthand every day. But I think when we start our business, it already feels so difficult and already so hard just to get to starting. And I don't think we talk about what happens after that enough. So I'm hoping what I've learned on my journey is something that can help you a little bit. So I've kind of identified a few pillars and I'm going to run through them. And I'd love to hear what you think, even through the presentation or afterwards, kind of on these things I've identified that I think can really help your business scale. So I've got a few I'm going to go through. And the first one, and I think it's critically important, especially this happens a lot in tech, is stay in your lane. So you can't be everything to everyone, period. It's your business and you get to choose what to do with it. It's ultimately your decision. I think those decisions can be super lonely, but at the end of the day, stay in the lane and the box that you want to actually play in. So ways to do this. So building mission and value for your business that will help you when you get inundated with requests at every turn. So This can be any type of business. You'll get tons and tons and tons of advice. You'll get requests. Can you make this feature for me? Can you carry this product for me? Can you do this for me? But at the end of the day, you are the one that oversees and understands the critical outcomes of the business. So staying in your lane and making sure that you truly know where you play is really, really important. And that happens a lot, especially with technology-based businesses when you get into enterprise clients. So clients that have, if you're in maybe, let's say, retail technology, that have one door, and then you get into clients that have 500 doors and they have different needs. But it's your job to aggregate all of the data and information and make the best decision for you. And I think the ultimate underlying theme of stay in your lane is you can say no to things, and that is totally okay. So as my first piece of advice is stay in your lane. You can't be everything to everyone, and say no. The second thing I think I've really discovered about companies that do a great job of scaling is actually building better processes. And this might sound like something you've heard before. I think there's some unique ways to do this. And the first one is fire yourself from the little things. So I have a question I want somebody to answer, but how much money do you think that your time is worth an hour? Throw it in the chat if you think you know. I feel like I've done a calculation, but how much time, like how much money is your time worth an hour? If anybody has a guess, throw it in. If you don't, that's totally fine. Oh, wait, 3, 2. Nobody has a guess? Either I'm not seeing chats. Carmen, good guess. So baseline, an entrepreneur's time is worth $100 an hour on a good day. So you don't pay contractors and service providers $100 an hour, probably. Paying for technology subscriptions, definitely not $100 an hour. So if you just baseline think about the fact that every single time you sit down to do a task that takes you an hour, you're burning $100 of your time in cash. So if you are doing things that take you away from the strategy that you have outlined for your business, offload it and forget about it. Find somebody else to do it. So a couple ways to do this: leverage technology to improve your everyday life. That includes creating hubs in specific tools where information and communication is readily available. It includes digitizing things. It includes leveraging SaaS technology, so subscription services. There's lots of tools and things that you can use to automate processes. Spend a lot of time evaluating your strengths and weaknesses. So not everyone is a graphic designer. I clearly did not design the slide deck. I would have probably cried every minute until this presentation. Or a designer is probably less than $100 an hour and less tears for me for sure. Not everyone can talk to customers. Not everyone is great at payroll. You need to create a network of service providers and contractors and people who are truly invested in your business who can sub in when you can't. So thinking critically about what is your time worth and what are your strengths and weaknesses. And then the other thing I would say is building a framework for consistency is a process that I think gets really forgotten about. So this goes a really long way with filling your trust bucket with customers and your team ultimately, which is if you say you're going to have a daily stand-up, have a daily stand-up and build that into your processes. If you say, I hope this never happens, you're going to pay people on Fridays, people till Mondays, it's like a big concern. But building a framework for consistency is a really great way to keep everybody accountable to the ultimate goals. And then in terms of processes, I think there's some really great questions to ask yourself about your processes and whether or not they scale. So if you stop doing blank today, what would be the outcome? So if you stopped having a stand-up every day, what would be the outcome? If you started having a stand-up every day, what would be the outcome? The other question is, if you could not work in your business one day, what would happen? And so I don't know if anyone's ever seen the Hilbergenberg Dragon's Den episode, but ultimately they say to Rachel, if you were road pizza, what would happen to your business? Now, let's eliminate the road pizza idea and say maybe if you won the lottery and you disappeared. And I don't think that really happens to entrepreneurs. I don't think they disappear from your business, but I think the pandemic has been a really good example of what if you were in a situation where you had to isolate 2 weeks and you couldn't work on your business? Is information available? Do people have passwords? Do you have a generic email inbox? There's lots of things you're probably doing where you hold the information and all of the cards and all of the keys, and nobody can step in and help you. So auditing what you do and what's available to your team, I think is really critical. And another question would be, if you doubled in size tomorrow, could you handle it? So if all of a sudden tomorrow, I think lots of it happens in tech, if you went from having 3,000 people that downloaded your app to 100,000 people, what would happen? So asking yourself questions about what you do today and then how it would look if your business doubled in size. Awesome. Oh, there's a question. Hold on, let me grab it. Automation, yes, please. What tools do you find people are missing most often? Okay. So the question is, what tools are people not using in their business that could help? So I think one very critical one is having a generic email inbox. I see this so often where people have like hannah@cultivator.ca, and then every single thing to do with even my role is actually like in my inbox, and then I go away, and what happens? Like nobody can get access to any of the information I have. The second thing would be, and we'll talk about it in a minute, is like sharing metrics and making sure you have a place for tracking metrics and sharing them. Other tools that I think are missed are like project management. So like, does everybody in your organization have access to like all of the tasks that are happening and where they're at? So a lot of transparency tools. And then I think we've just seen a lot in like the invoicing space. So like if you're in the business of doing invoices and you're like manually printing things and like handwriting checks, like that all needs to go. Like you cannot be like the signing authority and not have people be able to pay you by credit card. I think those are some key things, but I'm happy to chat about more of them at the end as I think of them. Okay. We are regularly challenge our processes and is it scalable? Yes, Therese, I knew you were good at that. I feel like if you could get into the habit of asking yourself every time you go to build something, can you document it and can you share it? You would eliminate a lot of things that you probably don't actually need to do or isn't really a process. So cool. Sorry, I should have said at the beginning, I talk very, very fast, but it's because I like to get through a lot of things. So feel free to interrupt me in the chat and ask questions for sure. But the next thing is hire the best people. I feel like this is very easy to say, but I feel like I recently read a book that I feel like is really going to help. I'm going to recommend it at the end. But the number one thing here is hire the best people for the job today and not the job forever. And this might sting, but there is a good chance that the team that is going to get you from A to B, which is where you are now, is not the team that will get you to the next milestone. And I think this can be very painful transition for entrepreneurs because especially in the startup stage, you're really scrappy. You've seen some stuff together. You've like slept in the incubator. Like you've just really grinded over the last few years getting to this stage. And identifying the fact that maybe those people aren't going to be in your business forever, I think is quite hurtful. And I think specifically, I know there's gentlemen on the call here, but for women, we really take it to heart when people aren't the right fit for our business. But I think it's really important to realize that there's a good chance that they don't have the skill set to take you to the next level. And that's okay. I think looking forward, hiring for diversity, always key, but not just diversity, let's say in color of skin, but more in background or experience or opinion or skill set. And that's the best way to solve problems at scale. I also think you should invest in your people development by leveraging tools. Something like a Berkman, like a personality test or a Kolbe index that really gives you an indication on like how your team works together. Understanding, my communication style versus my team's communication style, and making sure that we really know how each other work and really know how we show up as our best. And then I think the most important thing I've learned, in my career, and especially because I get to stand by and work with entrepreneurs every day, is there are 3 different types of people in the world. And I know not everybody fits into these buckets, but I like to call them the Department of Dreams, the Department of Reality, and the Department of Unicorns. So these are the people that I think work in your business. So the Department of Dreams, the majority of you being, entrepreneurs, and in The Hard Thing About Hard Things, which is a great book I'll share with you guys, is he calls them 1s and 2s. So the Department of Dreams being the ideas, the entrepreneurs, the quick starts. They're always 10 steps ahead. There's like 9 million things floating in the air. So that I call the Department of Dreams. There's the Department of Reality, and that's the person that's like, halt, oh my gosh, if we do one more thing or commit to one more thing, I'm literally going to die. They're very process oriented people. They get stuff done. They love to check off their to-do list. And then there's this like unique Department of Unicorns person, and they can take the crazy dream from, that person who's that number one, and they can communicate it to the people that are actually the operators. So those to me are the three people you need in leadership positions at your business. And they have to be able to fit different pieces at once. So some people have to be ones all the time, which is like the entrepreneur, the dream, always pushing forward. And some people have to be twos all the time. But ideally, you have somebody in the middle that can be a two to a number one, and then be a one to a number two. And that was a lot of numbers, but I promise you, it's something I really read and looked at over the last few years. So you can read more about it in The Hard Thing About Hard Things. I'll show you a photo of it at the end, but Ben Horowitz calls it the ones and twos. You can also look it up online, but I do think it's really critical when it comes to defining who the team is that's going to take you to the next level. Cool. Next thing, I do feel like I have a personal beef against like coined phrases like this, like fail forward, because I don't want anyone to ever feel like we're just like coasting over a situation that you're going through by saying it's just a learning experience. We all learn from our mistakes. But what I really mean here is it's going to be super hard. And when you're ready to quit, you're definitely closer than you think. And so I think what's really, really important here is you will fail, and accepting that you will fail is totally okay. And that might be the key. But nothing will kill the morale of your company and the growth of your business more than tolerating bad employees and bad attitudes, acting like everything is okay, or acting like the sky is falling, being inconsistent in general, and pretending that you know everything. So those are the key things I think when we talk about failing and failing forward. Is it's totally okay to fail, but it's how you respond to the failure. And another really great quote that I love is, the ability of a person to make timely and wise decisions is the mark of a great CEO. And I think what that really means is every minute that you waver without communication is lost ground with your internal stakeholders, so your employees, your investors, whoever's internally a part of your business, and your external stakeholders, which could be your customers. So every single time you waver and you don't make a decision and they don't know why, you're losing basically integrity points with people in your business. So fail forward, I think, is really key, because the sooner we get comfortable about talking about failure and we're okay with it and we talk to our support system about it, the more comfortable we're going to get with it, and the more we're going to grow, as people, owners, entrepreneurs, CEOs, even operators. Okay, my last point before I jump into a few more takeaways is measure everything. I think this is something that could be very easy once you set up the framework. So it's important because obviously you should know the state of your business at all times. Nothing will keep you more grounded, nothing will humble you more, and nothing will keep you more in touch with reality than tracking your key performance indicators, or KPIs as we call them. So you must establish the right metrics. That is different for every business. So i.e. in retail sales, the baseline metric is every day that you're open, do you break even? Not even do you make money, do you break even? And what is the dollar value you physically have to make every day in sales in order for your company actually to be breaking even? It's easy to probably find that dollar value, and then it's probably going to be very scary every day that you don't make it. And that's what can push your sales team forward. I think in SaaS, there's a lot to be said about like demos performed and converted to deals closed, to cold calls made. There's a whole bunch of different sales strategies for that. There's lots of, KPIs to track in product development if you are in tech. So features over time input, your marketing spend, so dollars spent versus engagement. These are all things that you don't have to track a million metrics. You definitely need like your main metrics and your supplementary metrics, but it doesn't have to be hard. You don't need a fancy tool. You don't need to invest like thousands of dollars into like a magical like metrics wizard. You could probably use a Google sheet, and you could probably color coordinate it that good is green, okay is yellow, and bad is red, and determine what's bad and what's good. And then every single day, if you're looking at your metrics, you should have a really, really good idea of what's going on. And then second to that, I think most importantly is your metrics that you're tracking have got to be available to everybody that works in the business. So that information has to be available because people have to understand where they stand and how the business is doing, because all of those metrics are really the reason, and they're really going to be the backbone of all of your decision making. So let's say you decide to open another retail store. Well, have you actually hit green for the last 3 months consistently and you're making revenue? Well, if your entire spreadsheet is red, maybe it's not the time to open a store. And that's just like a very, very high level, not real world example. But what you need to understand is if you do something and the things go up, this is good. If you do something and the numbers go down, this is probably bad, and make adjustments from there. And then my very most important, I think, last piece of advice is taking care of number one. So that's you. So you're going to go into battle with very, very little resources, very little time. Now understanding that your time costs $100 an hour, you're going to be overwhelmed and inundated with requests. And how are you going to take care of you? And so no more romanticizing that it's cool to be an entrepreneur. It's a struggle. It's a grind. You have to save your company's life and your own skin every day. And I think there's some really amazing people, especially here in Regina, that are doing amazing things with this. So these are my 3 favorite quotes from 3 of my favorite female entrepreneurs. And I know Kayla's on this call, so I don't know if this is actually Kayla's quote, but she did say it at an event, and she said, if you don't want to burn out, stop living like you're on fire. That was like so eye-opening for me, even in my position of there's a million things going on. And if I run around here acting like the sky is going to fall, the sky is definitely going to fall. So that's Kayla from Peak Wellness. She says, if you don't want to burn out, stop living like you're on fire. If you know Donna, Ray Crooks from Brain Snacks, I saw her do a keynote at an event 2 years ago, and I thought this was the most profound advice as a young female ever, which was, it takes time to put your mascara on. It takes time to take your mascara off. If you don't have time, don't wear it. This really got me. I don't know if anybody else agrees with this advice, but it's something that I've really held to heart, which is like, why am I doing this? Does this bring me any joy? And if it takes up your time, stop doing it. And then Mary, who lots of you know, who is a big part of WESC, and she's also works at Connexus here, and she owns her own company. My favorite advice of hers is like, stop buying stuff at HomeSense and just get a house cleaner. So evaluate where you're spending your dollars, and like, maybe you need somebody to like help you out in your personal life, which is like cleaning your house, because then you have all of the other time to do other things. So that's my like high level advice on taking care of number one, taken from, some of my favorite female entrepreneurs. But I'll leave you with these book recommendations, and I'll open it up for questions. I think these are 3 of the most amazing books I've ever read about just like functioning in society as a young female. So Brave Not Perfect is an amazing book. It's from the founder and CEO of Girls Who Coach. She has an amazing TED Talk, and it's all about how we worry about looking perfect, which means that we don't actually make critical decisions or go into battle together. So Brave Not Perfect is an amazing book. The Hard Thing About Hard Things is got to be one of the most profound books I've ever read on actually just managing a company. I feel like everyone should read it. I feel like I have it sitting here and I have every single page earmarked. I reference it all the time. So it's an amazing book. And then a really amazing feel-good book is The Ride of a Lifetime. So by the CEO of the Disney company. And I feel like this was a great feel-good story. And he has tons and tons of tactile advice on growing and scaling and operating your business. So with that, I feel like this is a very good quote for me to stop blabbing on, which is, whether you think you can or you think you can't, you're right. That's Henry Ford, so founder of the Ford Motor Company. And ultimately, the decision is up to you. There's tons of resources out there between WESC and Cultivator and people you can access who have been where you are before and who have, blazed the trail. We're all here to support you. I think Saskatchewan is here really to be a support system, but whether you think you can or you think you can't, you're right. So with that, I talked a whole bunch. I'm super available for questions. I totally want to hear from you. I don't see any coming in yet. You can drop them in the chat. Okay, Trevor, okay. What aspects of supporting and scaling startup does Cultivator struggle the most with? How can the ecosystem better support Cultivator to reduce those obstacles? This is a super good question. So Cultivator right now, we're supporting businesses from ideation, which is like very, very early stage. Like, I think I might have an idea, all the way to generating very significant ARR. And what we really need to find and work through is establishing a very, very strong network of mentors of people who have been here before and who have done this and grown and scaled businesses, because that entrepreneur to entrepreneur or founder to founder communication is the number one way we can support companies. So that would be the first thing, is we're seeking and trying to get a hold of and working through building an incredible mentor network so that our companies have access to people, all over Canada and even into North America who have done, amazing things and are really passionate about helping new entrepreneurs. And then I would say the second thing, and Trevor, I'll answer this because you asked the question, is we need to inject some capital into the province. So, we need to make sure that we have a lens on our companies, across Canada and even into the US and maybe even internationally, across the oceans, is making sure that we have companies that are investor ready, because investment is exactly what will help your company, could take your company to the next level, because that can reduce a lot of obstacles. So Trevor, if that didn't answer your question, drop me a secondary question in the chat. Question from Kayla Kozan. What KPIs do you think we should be taking a look at early on? Okay, so I think it depends on the type of business you have, but ultimately, I know maybe Kayla, I can answer from the lens of like what you're doing with Peak, which is like, at the end of the day, probably what you're trying to measure is like impact, because I'm assuming the impact that you're having on every single person that uses Peak as a service is like word of mouth. So it might be difficult to measure this, but what I would say is, like, if you're sending a survey to every single person who takes a class, you should have all of their answers actually allocated and how they rated your sessions, and look at your NPS score every single day and relate that back to who led that class, and make sure you're coaching or you're working with that person so that they're improving their class every single time. So that would be like really unique to your business. I think additional KPIs are like ultimately like clicks on your website. So if you spent $50 this month on Facebook ads and nobody actually came to your website or got through your third page, that might be an indication that maybe your website is too complicated. They can't find the information they need on the homepage, or you didn't hit the correct target audience with your advertising. So that would be another thing I'd recommend. And then ultimately, especially when you're in a small space, is 5 minutes at the end of every day to just like track and identify how your day went and figure out where you lost time or lost your way, I think is also super important. If that didn't answer your question, also send me a follow-up question. Does anybody else have a question? I usually come up with questions and then I say things like, have you thought about this? But I didn't, I ran out of time. Dun, dun, dun. What's next for the Cultivator? This is a question from Christy Eamon. Oh man, Christy, you know what's next? Doing whatever we can in any capacity to support our founders through their next phase of growth. And that can mean a lot of things for everyone. But I think what's really critical here is Cultivator has and is working on making sure that we're really following, startup methodology around talking to our users and our users being founders. And our main goal is to really understand how we can support your business and what do you need from us, and then building that into our program so that you truly feel like A, we listen to you, and B, that we do have like your best interest at heart and we really can support growing your company. So I think right now we're really focused on setting a really good cadence for, founder one-to-ones and following up and what can we do for you, and really just hoping we can get out of your way and not ask for time away from your business unless we truly need it. So I think that's what's next, but other than the annual SaaS Startup Summit that's coming up, but that's a big thing. Oh, Cerise is a very hard question. So Cerise's question is, what are you most proud of about yourself? I think I can answer like a lot of things here, but the one thing that I think is critically important is I really love to work in businesses or for people that make me feel like I have an impact every day. And I'm just hitting my 2-year at Cultivator on the weekend. And I've never felt, probably in my whole life, that my actual day-to-day actions have a really positive influence on someone else, or that everything that I do is helping somebody else move forward. And I think that's something I've learned a lot at Cultivator, and something I've heard a lot from founders is, if we can follow through on the things that you ask us, we're removing obstacles for you. And that gives me like a major sense of satisfaction. So I know we might have like a million things on the go. We can't get back to you instantaneously, but I'm really proud of the work that we've done, not only for founders, but specifically in the female founder front. I just feel like nobody else in Canada can say that we operate, you know, in our early stage program at 50% female founders. So that's something I'm very proud of for Cultivator and for myself. Okay, Kyle says, what are some of the tips for being a leader while you're still are responsible for the day-to-day operations? Oh, Kyle, this is such a hard question. I think I kind of alluded to it earlier, but I do think that consistency is like very key. I know it's really easy to get very, very, very excited or very, very down the dumps when things are, you know, moving and shaking and changing so fast. But I think it's being super real about your capacity and where you're at. And then sharing with your team when things aren't going well and sharing with your teams when things are going really well. But ultimately, like every single thing that we do is a team win, and every single thing that we don't do is a team loss. And we have to cultivate that mentality because we're all on the ship together. So I would say consistency is my tip for being like a leader when you're responsible for day-to-day operations. And another really good thing, and this is also a really amazing piece of advice from Mary Weimer, is when you go on this adventure and you're really in a high performance, you know, job, or you are running a business, is you have to have discussions with the people in your personal life about the state of the universe in your professional life. Because what I think I really have and what we're striving for now, especially as the world has changed so much, is this like work-life fusion balance. So it's not so much just like you can't turn your computer off at 4, and if you want to, and that's the you know, the person you are and that's kind of business you work for, no problem. But if your family and your partner and the people in your personal life understand what's on your plate, how it's going, when you had a hard day, and you bring them along your journey, it totally helps you perform in your professional life for sure. Just looking at the time. Okay, question from Kayla. Are there any other SK or virtual events we should be adding to our calendar? Great question. Yes, I think there's a lot happening. There's a lot happening in West because a lot of things coming up. Cultivator is hosting the annual Sask Startup Summit on Thursday, September 9th and Friday, September 10th. Anybody can join. There's a few pieces that are open to the public, so hybrid version. So you could join from home a demo day and you could watch 10 companies pitch for $10,000 on Thursday. You could join our Thursday night social to have a big celebration of Saskatchewan technology. And then Friday is more conference style, and that's open to everyone. It's free to attend. You just have to register online. All the information will be on our social media soon. And you can tune in to see some amazing speakers. So even if your business is in tech, I think you could learn something from the speakers we have. So that's the big event from our side. I know there's lots of things going on. I feel like I might need like a Krugo guide or something to help me navigate events. But those are the big ones. And I would also keep your eye on what's happening with the Audacity movement, because there's lots happening there too. Okay, we have a few more minutes. I can answer another question, or Lola can jump back in.
Yeah, I was kind of to say a little bit of a closing while we wait if there are any extra questions. But
Sure.
thank you so much, Hannah, for that wonderful presentation. It was very insightful and empowering. I was taking some notes down here. And this is the last webinar in our Connexus series that was in August. Our next events won't start till September, but we have lots of in-person events starting up soon. So if you want to head over to west.ca/events to see those, that would be awesome. And as well, the events that Hannah mentioned, those will also be really good. So I think that's all the updates I had. If there are no extra questions, I will end the webinar, but thank you all for joining us in your lunch hour today, and hope to see you in another West webinar. Thank you again, Hannah.
Awesome. Thanks so much. And you can reach us at hello@cultivator.ca or follow us on social media if you have any questions.
Wonderful. I'll be sharing the recording and our contact information. You should all get it all by tomorrow. Thanks.
Perfect.
Bye.
Thanks, everyone.